if you are, I don't want to say crazy, but if you are too strict with your kids in anything, when they inevitably get to the real world, I've been there, right? Like I was homeschooled growing up. I know what it's like to be like on one end of a strict spectrum, and then you're exposed to real life, and you're like, wait a minute, what's happening? And everybody's like, who's the weird kid? I'm not saying that they should eat, a bunch of crap and just so they can fit in, but I understand that there's more to it than just the food that they eat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Rochelle, the Real Life Carnivore. So grateful to have you here. If you haven't already checked out my previous videos, I have a whole series on carnivore moms and a couple of carnivore dads even, and a carnivore grandma. I really encourage you to check those out. They're super packed full of information about carnivore, what carnivore has done for these people, what it has meant to them, and where they are with their carnivore journey now. Today, we are changing things up. We have a really cool guest today. His name is Carnivore JT, and I'm really excited to introduce him to you. So without further ado, let's dive on in. All right. And without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce to you guys Carnivore JT, aka Jason. He is an online coach, a podcaster. He is the owner of Savage Carnivore Company and Savage Carnivore Fitness. And today we're going to be addressing some of the hot topics of carnivore. I'm really excited to have his perspective and for him to share his wisdom here because these are questions that we get asked a lot. And so I hope you guys will stay to the end because you're not going to want to miss what he says. So welcome to the show, JT. How's your day going?
It's going good. It's going really good. Actually just went down to a local bison farm, and picked up some bison, which I'm excited about. For anybody who hasn't had bison, it's super similar to beef, usually a little bit leaner. But it's nice to mix it up with some different cuts here and there.
Man, I'm a huge buffalo fan. When I lived in Canada, I used to eat buffalo all the time. It's delicious. And yes, it's a little bit leaner. The steak is usually purple instead of red, but it's totally awesome. Well, let's just start by you introducing yourself. Who is Carnivore JT?
That's me. Yeah. Carnivore JT is so I started with animal based, probably it's almost 2 years now. And I call it dirty animal based. And by dirty animal based, my meals were animal based, mostly carnivore, but then I snacked however I wanted at the end of the night. Um, that shocks people sometimes. They're like, wait, what do you mean you snacked? I literally ate whatever I wanted. If I wanted chips, I had chips. If I wanted a drink, I had a drink. And I started instantly feeling better. I was like, man, this is weird. And then after I had really good results in like 3 months, like, man, maybe I should get like a little more serious with this. So then I got a little stricter with animal based. Did that for almost a year. And then I was like, man, what happens if I just go full carnivore? There was always a bunch of contention because my name is carnivore and people would be like, you're not actually carnivore. And I'm like, I eat like 50 grams of carbs, like chill. It's not that big of a deal. And at the time, Paul Saladino was still carnivore MD. And I was like, you got a guy who's eating like 250 grams of carbs that calls himself carnivore. Like, just you guys need to like calm down a little bit. And then I went full carnivore and felt even better and have been that way ever since. And that was about 10 months ago, 9 months ago. So yeah. And how Carnivore GT kind of evolved is after about 6 months, I was like, man, I feel like there's not a ton of carnivores out there. I should start, posting some stuff. It started faceless. Like I would just post, some information here and there. And then I realized that the biggest knock on carnivores, they're like, there's no athletic people that are carnivore. There's no people, carnivore people aren't in shape. No carnivores work out. And so I was like, all right, well, I feel like I can change that stigma. And so I started getting a little more into the fitness of end of it, started doing more recipes, and then kind of evolved to where I am now.
Awesome. Okay, tell us a little bit about your companies that you own.
So it originally started the Inner Carnivore. That's the website, that's the podcast, that was the initial logo. I decided I wanted to branch out a little bit. The first branching out was into more physical products. So I've done t-shirts for quite a while. But the t-shirts are it's not hands-on at all, right? It's print on demand. People order it, they get printed, they get shipped it. I don't actually touch any of the stuff that's involved with the t-shirts. I make the designs, right? Make the designs, upload it to the website. I decided I wanted to go into knives a little bit. So I do kitchen knives, chef knives, steak knives. Uh, and I wanted a little bit of a rebranding with it. So started Savage Carnivore and then decided to branch off of that into the online coaching, which was my background prior to this. We talked a little bit about it. I was, collegiate athlete, coached collegiately, did strength and conditioning at the D1 level, and then was a personal trainer for a number of years, and was in the fitness space for a long time. My degree's in sports medicine, so it was a natural transition. I didn't do it right away, but I kept having people ask over and over, so I decided to take on like a small client load and decided the Savage Carnivore Fitness was a good branch off of that. So that's how that name and that company came about.
Awesome. Okay. I love that you've done this, and it seems like that's really where your heart is. And I love that you decided, because people like to knock the fact that there are not a lot of athletes who are carnivores. I'm glad that you decided to go down that road because as a former national athlete, I'm no longer competitive in what I used to do, but it's interesting for me to see how people's bodies do change and evolve, and how the right workout with carnivore can be incredible. Can you talk a little bit more about working out and carnivore and which one is more important?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. I'm actually doing a video right now. I did most of the research. I just got to film the actual reaction. And I'm probably going to butcher what the organization is, but I believe it was the American Society of Sports Nutrition. Don't quote me on that. I'll actually have it in the video, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But they came out with a positioned stance on the ketogenic diet and athletic performance. Um, and for anybody equating the two, when it comes to performance, keto and carnivore is going to be pretty similar. You're not going to eat much carbs. You're going to have higher fat, and you're going to have pretty stable amount of protein. So when it comes to studies on performance, keto and carnivore most of the time can go hand in hand. And their position was that keto is adversely affects performance. I'm like, okay, well, I know that for most people that's not the case. If you want to make the argument that somebody in the Tour de France needs to eat carbs in order to go through their late stages up, 20 miles of hills, okay, we can make that argument. We can discuss it, but that excludes 99.99999% of the people in the world. So why are we talking about it? Like that doesn't make sense. I know plenty of cycling enthusiasts that do hardcore cycling for long durations that are on low carb, ultra marathoners who are on low carb, decathletes that are on low carb, Ironmans that are on low carb, triathletes. I mean, like all things that indicate that you can do this on a low carb diet. So this position paper that came out, I went and looked at the studies that they referenced, and they had about 16 of them. And the problem with keto and performance, and why I think it gets a bad rap, is if you look at the studies, all of the ones, I would say all of them, most of the ones that show a negative performance on a low carb diet are under 4 weeks, right? So the amount of time that people are allowed to go into a ketogenic state, become fat adapted, is very minimal. And when you actually look at it, if you're going to, from an athlete standpoint, you need 6 months minimum, right? And so then you go into look into the couple studies that they did include where people had 6 to 12 weeks to get adapted. And you find that most of the time performance did not change at all. And you're like, well, then why would you do it? Well, because one study specifically, that was a short term study, even though those athletes had a decrease in performance, they said they would try to incorporate low carb because they had so many other benefits outside of performance. Like that's the reason. Like people don't necessarily go keto for this boost in performance. I think you can get boost in performance, especially when it comes to endurance athletics, but people do it because they also have real life, right? Like 99.999% of us are not being paid to go exercise, right? Or compete or whatever it is. So if you're not, you have to take into consideration your normal life. So if I can have similar performance, but then have lifestyle benefits that improve by eating a certain way, why wouldn't I look at that? So I think that's to answer the actual question, like the circle back and what's more important for a normal person, it's your diet, right? Like if you go to a world class athlete can get away with eating almost whatever they want, right? Like I did a video that showed Luka Doncic, arguably the best basketball player in the world right now, talking about how he's going to go get like a fast food cheeseburger before his game, right? You have, stories of numerous athletes eating just absolute trash diets or using recreational drugs or drinking or, David Wells, a very successful Major League Baseball pitcher, threw a perfect game while still drunk from the night before. So, like when we talk
Wow.
about athletes, yeah, when we talk about athletes, like that's like nutrition for most athletes, nutrition is a very small part of it, right? They eat whatever they want, they eat when they want. And so, for a normal person, diet's going to be the most important. It's the old adage, right? You can't out train a bad diet. And that's true for 99.9% of people.
Okay, I love that you touched on this. And obviously, I have a million questions, but I want to stick to this question. What are your thoughts then on calories in, calories out, the ongoing saga?
Ah, so I have a couple people that I converse with rather regularly on social media. One of them is Nick Norwitz. And so anybody who doesn't know who Nick is, he has a PhD from Oxford in nutrition and metabolic sciences. He's also currently in his coming up on his last year of medical school at Harvard. Brilliant guy. He best defines it. I've always said it is a retrospective explanation, this retrospective description of what happened. He uses the term post hoc. It is a post hoc description of what happened. And people are like, well, what do you mean? What I mean is you can't accurately predict any of this, right? You can't predict the calories that go in because you can't accurately measure what is actually absorbed by the body. And why that's important is give gluten to somebody who has celiac disease, give lactose to somebody who is lactose intolerant. They're not going to break it down. They're not going to absorb it. They're going to flush it right out, which means they didn't actually contribute to their calories in. Okay, so if I don't know what calories in is actually being absorbed and used, that doesn't make it a very good metric. In addition, I can't accurately predict what's in the food that I'm eating, especially given that the FDA gives a 20% margin of error, plus or minus, on what the caloric intake is of the food you're eating on a nutrition label, right? So now I have a 20% error here. I don't know what's actually being absorbed. And then the food that I eat is going to affect what my calories out is because you have stuff like the thermogenic effect of food. Then we go in and I can't actually predict how many calories I'm burning. So what is the point, right? The only thing that I can do is, let's say I go on a diet for 6 months and I lose 50 pounds. I then I was in a calorie deficit because I burned more calories than I took in. And you're like, cool, that doesn't help anybody who started 6 months ago. So for everybody that says, well, I use calories in, calories out, it can be used. It's a tool. The more metabolic healthy you are, the more experience you have with it, the more you can manipulate calories and lose weight, gain weight. But for a general explanation, or even, and this is my ultimate problem with calories in, calories out, it's based in the energy balance model of obesity, which is a terrible model because it doesn't predict anything. And That's just what it is. You cannot explain why people are obese with calories in, calories out. Because people go, well, people just eat too much. I'm like, okay, I can eat as much as a normal person and lose weight. I'm like, oh, well, you must be burning more, metabolism. It's just, it's not a good explanation, and it's not a good reason as to why we are in the situation that we are, which is going towards 80% of the general population being overweight.
All excellent points. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the obesity epidemic that's happening currently in our world, in our nation? Whoa.
We eat crap food. Like, it's just when you actually, yeah, we have an overconsumption problem, but it's honestly, if you were to take a bunch of drug addicts and stick them in a room with a bunch of drugs and then go, well, the only reason that they're having problems is because they continue to take the drugs. You're like, okay, well, is it their fault or is it your fault for locking them in a room with a bunch of illicit substances? So it's this, yeah, it is the fault of the people consuming this food, but it's also our fault in the fact that 70% of our food supply is ultra processed. Like,
Yes,
that's
yes. I saw that statistic yesterday.
70%.
Yeah, 70% of 600,000 approximately foods available on the market are ultra processed. I'm like, 70%, that's disgusting. That's disgusting. And that goes for natural foods. Anything that's labeled natural is probably not natural. They're just allowed to say it is now.
Yeah, and ultra processed, the definition of ultra processed is it contains minimal foods that are not processed, right? So minimal whole foods. It also contains a bunch of additives. It also contains a bunch of fillers, all that kind of stuff, preservatives. It basically boils down to food that you cannot make at home. So 70% of our food supply you could not recreate in your own kitchen, which is mind blowing to me. Like, we eat garbage food. We celebrate garbage food, right? You have people with massive followings online talking about the health benefits of stuff like seed oils, how, studies show it's cardioprotective and actually good for you. And you wonder why we're in the situation we are. You remove all of this garbage food and people aren't going to be overweight. Sure, you're going to have some. There will always be people who find a way to overconsume and, that kind of stuff. But you can't expect an entire population, which literally will do whatever the government tells them to be in the situation that we are, given the food and the information that we supply them with.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that one, it like drives me absolutely bananas that people don't realize that type 2 diabetes is reversible. And I'm sure you've heard this as well. There's a lot of discussion about type 3 diabetes and the things like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. All of these are metabolic syndromes, in my humble opinion. And I just think people are just kind of lost. Like, uh, I think Anthony Chafee had a video out where he was talking about the study that was done on children who had one egg a day and then children who had no eggs. And the children who had the one extra egg a day, their IQ averaged 15 points higher, and like they were just all around healthier. And obviously that's because of the saturated fats and the complete proteins, which leads me to my next question. What are your thoughts on all the bioengineered ingredients in food now?
It's, again, if that was to bridge the gap between people eating and not eating, that's one thing, right? But we now have somehow turned our food system into bioengineered is cheaper. The more ingredients has, the less the cost. And if I want to buy something that is not filled with crap, it costs me more. And so you're like, it's honestly, it's the monopolization of food, right? Like, and you can apply that to everything that's wrong with this country, right? Like with the world, right? It's the monopolization of medicine. It's the monopolization of pharmaceuticals, of food, of literally everything. And I'm all for capitalism. I'm all for people like making money, but at some point, somebody needs to come out and be like, yeah, we shouldn't be doing this, right? Like Coke should not be a main contributor to the governing body that deals with the certifications and credentials of dietitians, which are supposed to be the top nutrition experts in our country, right? So that's when we have a problem, right? And then you have, some of the top medical experts coming out and being like, drink Diet Coke because it's good for you. It's healthy. It's better than water. And you're like, come on, like you can't objectively look at the process by which diet drinks and the ingredients that go into them are made and say it's good for you.
I love that they try and say that it's good for you, and I think you're spot on about all of this. I think the statistic is it's all of the mass produced food products on the market are owned by 5 companies. Is that right?
I don't know the exact number, but I do know, and Chafee's done a video on this as well. The people that own the largest food companies in the country were tobacco companies.
Yes, yes,
Like
yes. I heard that. Yes.
you can't like at some point we need to just like zoom out a little bit and go, this doesn't make sense, right? If companies who are extremely profitable selling tobacco products have doctors promoting their tobacco products, and then finally research comes out that they're bad for you, when they immediately pivot and start buying up food companies, you can't tell me that's because of health. Like they do not care about the health of people. And so then it's no different than pharmaceuticals, right? It's no different than why would you assume that Pfizer is going to lie to you? I don't know. Just go look at the fines that pharmaceutical companies have paid in the last 10 years. It's billions of dollars. And it's not because they mislabeled a product, it's because they killed people.
Yep.
It's you cannot look at these companies and be like, I think they have our best interests at heart.
No. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And it's so refreshing to have this conversation with you because a lot of people think that just because you're carnivore, you're automatically a conspiracy theorist. And it's like, well, the difference between a conspiracy and the truth is usually about 6 months. Sorry. What are your thoughts on supplements? Do you think carnivores need to supplement with vitamins? Where are your thoughts on that?
So I actually just did a video a little bit on this. I think if you are metabolically healthy, so you go into the way of eating without issues, right? Without past things that you are trying to overcome, um, and you are eating enough, you should not need to supplement. Now, do I think supplements are bad? No. Um, I am someone that I've always supplemented a ton of different stuff just to see if I could get any benefits, usually in the gym, right? Like, wow, what if I mix this powder and this powder and this powder? Will I get a better pump, right? If I have this vasodilator and this, right? I've always been like a mad scientist on using supplements to try to boost a little bit. I'm not a fan of using supplements because your diet is lacking. That's my big knock on veganism is you should not design a diet where you have to supplement. Now people will come back and be like, "What about carnivore and this and that?" And I know a ton of carnivores, and I have not met anybody that has scurvy yet. And I can go into in depth as to why I don't think we need very much vitamin C. Um, but no, I don't think you need to supplement if you are eating enough food, especially fat. Now, that being said, part of the video that I did is there's certain considerations, especially if you eat like a lot of grain-fed beef versus grass-fed, with your like omega-3 and omega-6 profiles, given that grain-fed has a much higher ratio, and higher ratios of omega-3 to omega-6 have been shown to be problematic. Now, 90, 5% of people aren't going to have an issue with it. But if that is a consideration, either that's what's, available to you, or you just don't like omega-3 heavy stuff like fish or anything like that, then you can look at supplements in lieu of going out of your way to do that kind of stuff. So I don't eat that much fish. I like fish. I like fish a lot. I don't like paying for fish. I don't necessarily like preparing fish. I like to make food in bulk. Um, and fish is one of those that I do not trust in the fridge for very long. So I will often supplement with a like wild fish caught eggs just to get a little bit. Do I need to? No. If I stop taking it for a month, is it going to be problematic? No. Might it benefit me a little? Sure. So if it does, I'm okay with doing it. I think people just get scared. They're like, oh, I can't supplement. Like, if you want to supplement, supplement. Honestly, if you're afraid of scurvy, take a vitamin C pill. I don't care, right? It's much better to just put your mind at ease and take a supplement than it is to, have this dogmatic stance that I don't ever need to supplement and I don't want to. If you don't want to, don't. If you do, do. It's People make it way more complex than they need to.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I know for me personally, that was a really big thing, obviously, coming from the world of being an athlete. You do have to supplement because your diet, well, at least mine did, it really sucked. I didn't eat like garbage when I was competing in bodybuilding, but I did eat, and I ate a lot of grains and a lot of vegetables and just like lean proteins and all the things. So, yeah, my body was super lacking, and it showed up for me with symptoms like infertility, no sleep, like inability to sleep, low energy, mood swings, brain fog. The list goes on. But I like what you're saying about this, and I think it's about getting to know our bodies too. So for me personally, I've been a carnivore for almost 2 years now, and I have had a lot of metabolic changes. I went from being infertile to being fertile to miscarrying to getting pregnant to gestating a baby full term to postpartum, which is a lot. That's a lot of ups and downs for a person's body. And I still find that I have to take things like vitamin D and methylated folate. And I say that because I've randomly run out of these things and I notice changes in my mood, even though I'm eating the same way. So I know for me personally, supplements are a thing that I need to do. Now, do I recommend them for people? No. I always encourage people to do their own research and to tune into what their body actually needs to try and figure that out for themselves. But I think a lot of people are so disconnected from their bodies and what their bodies actually need that even just making that comment, like, how do you feel without this? Like most people couldn't even tell you. They're like, well, actually, I don't know. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, so one that I've done is I started taking ZMA, which is zinc, magnesium, and vitamin B6. Uh, and the reason I took it, so I started sleeping better on carnivore. But it still takes me a little while to fall asleep. Um, I suffer from the, being on my phone. Yeah, I should get rid of it, but it is what it is. So I started out on a recommendation from somebody. They're like, yeah, try this. I was like, okay. I tried it and I fell asleep quicker and I stayed asleep longer and I felt better in the morning. I was like, okay, like I was sleeping good before, but if I can sleep even better by taking a supplement, why wouldn't I? Like it doesn't make sense to me why people would exclude supplements just out of principle when I don't need to take ZMA. I can sleep just fine. It's not putting me to sleep. It's not like a sleep aid, right? I'm going to be up all night if I don't take it. But if it improves my life, I'm totally fine with it. I had a lady I was talking to who has insomnia and she struggles sleeping. And I was like, well, try ZMA. And it's helping her. So why wouldn't you? Like 95% of us come from something where we have some sort of metabolic issue we're trying to address. Like that's just, I think the latest statistic was 88% of the United States is metabolically sick. So the chances of you being in perfect health with zero considerations is very low. So if you can find supplements that make you feel better, absolutely do it. I don't recommend doing, a bunch of garbage supplements with a bunch of fillers and, a bunch of stuff in the capsules and all that. But if you can find a good supplement that helps you feel better, it doesn't make sense why you wouldn't.
Yeah, I like that you wrap that up with that. I think that's really important for people to consider. And I like I like using organ meats for supplementing. I feel like those are nature's vitamin instead of getting the gelatin packed whatever, which is often like cellulose, not actual bovine gelatin. I find I'm less reactive to those. And be careful to read the labels on everything, you guys. Like a lot of supplements contain things like rice powder or I don't even know, like coconut. And like I said, cellulose. These are not ingredients that are very conducive for people. For a lot of people, they're inflammatory. So I would encourage you to make sure that you're reading your labels. JT, I want to ask you, how do you define carnivore and what's the difference between carnivore and lion diet?
So this is a good one, because I get asked so many times, can I eat this? And my default response, and for anybody who follows me, anybody who's seen any of my content, I'm a little bit of a smart ASS. Like that's just my nature. And when everybody asks this, my default response is you can eat whatever you want. Like eat whatever you want. Um, Now how I define carnivore is animal based, right? And people get confused with the animal based diet, but you are basing your foods around animal products, and it's for the most part the elimination of ultra processed foods. That's your starting point. Now, a lot of people will get more benefit the stricter they get, right? The elimination, some people still try to include avocados, some low oxalate vegetables, some fruits. That's fine if you feel good. Most people will get an even more benefit by sticking to your standards, right? Like your ruminant meats are your staple. Dairy as tolerated, minimal spices, make sure you're eating enough salt. And that's what your basis is. I eat a lot of cheese. I love cheese. If I get a good cheese, I don't have problems with cheese. I'm all for it. Um, Now, lion is one of those that's like a last ditch resort for people who just have the worst of the worst autoimmune issues. Pioneered by Michaela Peterson, who has some of the worst issues I've ever read of anybody ever. She was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis when she was like 8 years old. She was on RA medication when she's 12 years old, which RA medication is horrible stuff. It's a massive autoimmune suppressant. She had terrible depression, terrible joint pain. By the time she was 21, she had multiple joint replacements. Just one of those things that it's difficult to live life. I'm truly impressed that she made it through it. Like that's just, for somebody that young dealing with that many issues, that's terrible. She found that eating just meat, water, and salt made almost everything like better. Like it made her be able to live a normal life. She's married, she has kids, she's very successful. She, has all of these endeavors that she does. And that's what worked for her. And that's what she found. It's literally the ultimate elimination diet. Most people not sustainable. But for people that's your last resort, that might be the way to look at it. So a lot of people will try lion diet just to give it a go to see how it feels. I don't know too many people who are stuck on it, just because it's pretty difficult to just eat beef, salt, and water. So carnivore, you have a little bit more flexibility with it. Animal based would be even more. I'm not sure how animal based got its name, but it's, again, based around animals, but you have the inclusion of fruits. So
I think it's 70% of your diet. If 70% or more of your diet comes from animal-based products, then it's considered carnivore or meat-based. I think that's kind of a broad spectrum because 30% of your diet being from not carnivore is pretty significant. And I love that you brought up Michaela Peterson. And yeah, her story is heart-wrenching, but it's also encouraging because she has been able to overcome so much. I am currently experimenting with Lion. I broke after about 46 days. I was just having a lot of palate fatigue. I was like, oh, I'm just like bored of this. And I realized and I recognize, coming from having a history of disordered eating, that boredom is a natural part of, life, and it's okay to not want to fill my face with food. But I am trying Lion, and I am trying Lion, and it feels really good to me. Obviously, I'm breastfeeding a little guy right now, and I noticed he was having some issues, and I was like, okay, well, whatever I eat goes into my breast milk and is going into him. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll do some adjustments and some tweaks. So I cut out dairy, and I did it for a week, and I was like, I don't feel any different. I'm still hungry. I'm still craving stuff. Da 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 da. No change in the baby. Well, I didn't do it for long enough. Like you mentioned at the beginning of our call, 4 to 6 weeks is just not long enough for people to see significant change or significant fat adaptation. It's more like 6 months. And in this case, it took about 6 weeks of me cutting dairy out for me to actually see an improvement in him. And the things he was experiencing were congestion, a little bit of like imperfections in his skin and his face, and just a little bit of fussiness. And he would get diarrhea. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna take it out for a longer period of time, see how it goes. It's been great for him. It's also been great for me. Suddenly the eczema in my ears completely gone. Completely gone. I'm like, and I knew that. I knew that dairy was a culprit for me, even if it's raw. I love raw dairy. I love dairy. I'm not knocking dairy. I would eat it all day, every day. But it does not bode well in my system. And it probably to me means that my gut has to do a little bit more healing and sealing before it's ready for dairy. The other thing I noticed for me personally, and I would love to hear your feedback on this, eggs are like carbs to me. If I eat 4 eggs with even, half a pound of beef, I am hungry in 20 minutes. If I don't eat the eggs with the half a pound of beef, I don't even eat the half a pound of beef. I eat a little bit of it and I'm like, I'm done with this. But if I include eggs, I'm like, whoop. They're like, I don't know, it's the trace amount of carbs in it or what, or if they're just hyper palatable. But what are your thoughts on eggs? Because I'm obsessed with them and I have to cut them out. I cut them completely out. My appetite regulated, my little dude's digestion further regulated. It just seems like there's some benefits here for me personally.
Eggs are a tough one because they have such good nutrition, right? So it's one of those that some people try to force because of the nutrition aspects. I actually don't eat that much in the way of eggs. I did a food sensitivity test back before I even started. So back when I did a 90 days of the Whole30 diet, which is just straight whole foods, no processed, no nothing, right? Lean meats, vegetables, fruits. What most people say carnivores should do. They're like, well, if you just ate a whole food diet, you'd have the same benefits. No, I didn't at all. Um, I lost some weight, but I didn't feel better. I didn't have better energy. I didn't have better digestion. And so I was like, okay, this is like something's up. Like I've done 90 days of zero cheats, right? Like I've done bodybuilding. I know what it means to stick to a plan. And in 90 days, I did not waver once, right? I didn't pick a snack off my kids' plates. I didn't like nothing. And so I did the sensitivity, and the only thing that came back was eggs. And so I cut out eggs for a while, but didn't see any differences. Um, I cut out eggs again, and I think I get a slight benefit, right? Like just a little bit better. And for me, eggs are actually the opposite. They're super satiating, and it's really difficult for me to eat enough food if I eat eggs. I noticed that when I did the 4K carnivore experiment, the first day, maybe it wasn't the first day. When I first started getting full, I was like, I'm just going to try and eat a ton of eggs. I couldn't, like, I made it through like 6 eggs, and I was like, dude, I don't want to eat another bite. I'm like, oh no. And 6 eggs is like 300 calories. I'm like, I'm in trouble if this is how my day is going to go trying to eat eggs. And so after that, I didn't eat eggs the rest of the time. because it was just too hard for me to get calories in. And since then, I don't really miss it that much. Like I like eggs, but they're not a food that I'm like, oh my gosh, I crave it. So I honestly since then have not eaten eggs very much. Every once in a while I'll make some up. But it's just it's one of those things that yes, I think they're great. They have a ton of nutrition. If you handle eggs, eat eggs, they're, cheap. You can buy, I can go down to Costco right now and buy 5 dozen for $10. So they're a great way to get protein. They're a great way to, do carnivore on the cheap, but I don't think they're not necessary. You don't have to have them. And if you feel better without them, just don't eat them, as most foods should be.
Okay, I like that you said that as well because I think that that's important for people to recognize that yes, if something does not agree with you, it's probably something you should not continue to consume. Do I enjoy eggs? Yes. Will I still enjoy eggs? Most likely. I'm not going to never eat eggs again. But you did touch on something very interesting that has just kind of made me think about this. I know 4 men around your age, my husband included, who all find eggs extremely satiating, but I have yet to find a woman who finds them satiating, which is very interesting to me. So I'm like, is that like a hormonal profile thing? Is it a metabolic profile thing? Something for me to kind of dissect and research. My next question for you. What are the top mistakes you think carnivores make?
I think the first mistake is not giving it enough time. Uh, People hear about all these stories. They hear about everybody, 90% of carnivores who are on social media and have any type of following is because they have this, I don't want to call it transformation, but they've experienced these results that other people want, right? Like I lost weight, I feel better, my energy got better, my depression, went away, my type 2 diabetes reversed, all of these things. And people go, that's what I want. And so they try and recreate that with themselves, not realizing that most of the time, like you said, it takes months to get, the full benefits. So people, will do this, they'll do it for a week. They're like, man, I feel terrible. I'm gonna, well, yeah, of course. Like you have spent your entire life relying on carbohydrates and then you took them out. What did you expect to happen? So the first is not giving themselves a realistic time frame with which to see if it works. I tell people the minimum should be 30 days, but honestly, as long as you are feeling okay after 30 days, I think you should extend it out because then you'll get an accurate idea of what it is. And there's no risk for you doing. I could literally I ate junk food for 21 straight days, and yeah, sure, I had some issues, but I'm not going to get any long-term complications by eating anything over a 30-day period, right? I can literally not eat for 30 days. Like, so people get like super worried about, oh my gosh, like, and you could balloon your cholesterol up to 1,000 for 30 days and nothing's gonna happen. Like you can balloon your blood glucose up to 200 for 30 days and nothing's really gonna happen, right? It's, long-term exposure to stuff that's gonna cause problems. So just take 30 days, right? Like take 30 days, see how you feel. If you feel okay, extend it out. Most people hit 30 days and they go, man, I kind of feel pretty good. And then they do it for another 30 days. And then they go, man, I feel even better. And then they do another 30. And then all of a sudden they're like, man, I didn't expect to do it this long, but I still feel good. I'm still finding stuff, right? I'm finding my psoriasis went away that no dermatologist ever talked to me about diet. I'm finding my eczema's going away. I'm finding acne's going away. I'm finding, joint pain, all of these things that you might not see for a couple months down the road. So I think that's not mistake number one is not having a realistic time frame of what to expect. Mistake number two is not eating enough fat. People get this idea. Some people will go, "You just want me to eat straight fat?" I'm like, no. If you eat carnivore and you don't think about it, you're probably going to end up with a lot of protein and not enough fat, right? Because they're like, well, I prioritize red meat. If you go out and get a bunch of sirloin and eat sirloin all day long, you're probably not going to get enough fat. I'm not suggesting everybody needs to munch on butter. That's a weird trend to me, but people like it. But you just got to be conscious, especially in the beginning, because what you're doing is you're removing one fuel source and you are trying to add another. And if you're not giving it enough, you're in for a bad time. So they got to be conscious of the fat. And then they got to be more conscious of electrolytes. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to supplement electrolytes. It can be a lot easier too, but salt being the main one, right? Like people have grown up with this demonization of salt and fat, and they subconsciously will not eat enough of either and then wonder why they're not feeling good. Like, well, you took away your you're making yourself dehydrated. You're not giving yourself fuel. Since you took away carbohydrates, you're not giving yourself anything. And you wonder why you don't feel good. Well, that's probably it. So those would be my main three. Like, be realistic, eat enough fat, make sure you have enough electrolytes. And if you have some issues, like take a look at your electrolyte balances. And the super easy way is just to add an electrolyte supplement, which honestly everybody should probably be doing anyway, especially if you're working out. Like, add it to your pre-workout.
Excellent answers to those questions. Okay, my last question for you. You mentioned you have children. How many children do you have, and how do you talk to them or approach them about carnivore, or do you talk to them about carnivore?
So I have a 3 and 5 year old. Um, I honestly don't a lot. Uh, I'm a little lenient when it comes to the diets that my kids have. Obviously, I think kids would benefit from eating as many whole foods as possible. Uh, some people don't like my answer with this. I don't necessarily think that kids should be low carb. Um, the ketosis and gluconeogenesis, while it may not be a bad thing for adults, it's still an added process that still can add some stress. And I don't think kids should have any stress with food. Um, Now, I think most of their carbs should come from whole foods, right? Like my kids eat fruit. Uh, I didn't start this way when my kids were first learning to eat. So getting them to eat straight meat is still a bit of a process. Um, there's stuff that you can do as far as like, making chicken nuggets with pork panko or making your own meatballs, stuff like that can help. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to force my kid to try and eat away and be like, if you don't want to eat this way, you're not going to eat. You're going to go hungry. Like, I think that's even worse. So no, my kids are not carnivore. I try as best I can to get them that way. I don't talk about diet a ton with them. Like I said, my oldest is 5, and I know some people that do, and that's great. Uh, but I also understand that there are, certain social things that they might encounter if you are, I don't want to say crazy, but if you are too strict with your kids in anything, when they inevitably get to the real world, I've been there, right? Like I was homeschooled growing up. I know what it's like to be like on one end of a strict spectrum, and then you're exposed to real life, and you're like, wait a minute, what's happening? And everybody's like, who's the weird kid? I'm not saying that they should eat, a bunch of crap and just so they can fit in, but I understand that there's more to it than just the food that they eat. And so as they start school, there's going to be some leniency, and my goal is just to try and set them up so that when they start making their own choices, they choose better food.
I really like that answer. Is your wife carnivore too, JT?
No, so she is more meat based. She does eat meat. She does eat a lot of red meat, but she still will do carbs, like rice and sweet potatoes, and she'll snack from here and then. So no, not she's not the opposite, right? She doesn't eat like a standard American diet, but she's definitely not as strict as I'm.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. My husband's the same way. He did carnivore with me initially for about 6 months because he wanted to reverse some issues he was having, like joint pain in his elbows that had not gone away in years. old injuries, infertility, those types of things. And now he got bored and started getting really skinny because my husband's not like me. He doesn't have a voracious appetite. He's like, he can eat a bit and he's like, I'm good. And I'm like, what? There's food on your plate. Like, like you said, you grow up in a strict household where it's like that's the rule, then you just kind of you either follow the rule continually throughout the rest of your life or you completely go the opposite spectrum. So I'm really grateful that you shared that as well. As we wind down with our remaining few minutes here, what would be your words of wisdom for someone who's considering the carnivore diet?
Try it. Like you literally have nothing to lose. Like I said, nothing is going to happen negatively in 30 days. The worst that's going to happen is you find out you have an allergy to meat. And, a week in, you're like, man, I can't do this because whatever it is. So, I mean, you can scare yourself into any diet. You can scare yourself out of any diet by going online. At the end of the day, most studies that you read will have the caveat that no one food is going to cause anything. Right? It's just the way it is. Like it's a lifestyle of choices that are going to lead to bad outcomes. So a lot of people won't try carnivore because they're like, oh man, but I heard you die if you don't get fiber. Like, okay, well, even if you believe the fiber studies, all you're doing is lowering your risk by a couple percents, right? Like, do you not drive at night because you're 20% more likely to die on the road than during the day? No, because people go, nah, my risk is still super low. Like, okay, well, it's literally the same thing. So if you actually believe all of these studies that come out, your risk of getting any long-term issues is still extremely low. Like the colon cancer one, right? You eat red meat, you're going to get colon cancer. Cool. Your absolute risk goes from 4 to 5%. Okay. So is 1% worth me changing my entire diet over? No, probably not. And that's what most nutritional studies are. 50% more likely. Cool. You went from 2 to 4%. Actually, it's 2 to 3%. You, you could have 100%. You are 100% more likely to develop cancer if you eat this way. It doesn't mean anything if it's from 1 to 2%, like if that's your absolute risk. So people just need to not get up in their heads so much over it. I can eat literally anything. I could drink every single day. I could eat Twinkies all day for a month. And yeah, I would have a bad time. But after a couple months of going back to eating the way I am, I wouldn't have any long-term repercussions. So don't be afraid. Like, just try it. Follow. There's a ton of people out there on tips and tricks and issues you might be having, research that's out there. Just do it. Give yourself a set number of time. Do it. You know, people, you can't tell me that people have never done anything difficult in their life. Like people have done stuff for Lent. People have done 75 hard. People, they're like, I'm going to give up TV. I'm going to give up my phone, video games. Like it's no different than any of that. Just commit to it and see. And if you think it's the worst thing in the world, don't do it ever again. But I think a bunch of people would benefit from it.
Love that. And if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to work with you, where can they find you? How can they get in contact with you?
So my website is theinnercarnivore.com. All of my socials are at Carnivore JT. Luckily, I don't have a bunch of people that are similar in name. So if you type in Carnivore JT into Google, you'll find all of my stuff.
Excellent. Well, I just want to thank you with my whole heart for coming on to the show today and just sharing your perspectives on things. You've just totally blown my mind about a few things here and just given me a lot to think about as well. And I really do hope that people take you seriously when you say, like, we can do anything hard for 30 days. If you've done it for 75, you can definitely do it for 30.
I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I will link all of JT's contact information in the description box below if you haven't done so already. Please go ahead and like and subscribe. Give it a thumbs up if you like this episode. Drop me a comment. Let me know where you're tuning in from and hit the little notification bell to be notified each time I upload new content. This is Rochelle, the Real Life Carnivore, signing out. Bye for now.